everyone. Thank you everyone for coming in. Quick question to get us rolling. Who here, by a show of hands, really likes coffee? Okay, me too. I am here to present my research on the influence of third wave coffee practices on customer experience and how that ties into the perceptions of third spaces. So how much do I like coffee, you might be wondering? I like coffee a lot. I have worked in the coffee industry for over 4 years now as a barista. It was my first job right after lockdown. I was 17 and I got a job as a barista in a local shop in my hometown, Round Rock. Since then, I have bounced around to various different coffee shops in the Austin area. I've worked for larger corporations such as Summer Moon, and I've also worked at smaller local companies here in Austin, and I absolutely love what I do. I find so much purpose in it. With that being said, ever since I was in 5th grade, I wanted to own my own coffee shop, which is why I have stuck with the industry for so long. I will never ever forget walking into Mozart's coffee shop for the first time with my parents. I was in 6th grade, and I immediately was honestly overwhelmed with the ambiance and how special it was to me and how comfortable I felt and how welcoming, and I wanted nothing more than to create a place of my own very similar to that and create a space for other people to feel welcome and safe and comfortable, which is why I have aspired to own my own shop one day. And I hope to use this research that I've conducted and apply it to my future business strategies in opening my own business. So throughout the presentation today, I plan to go over the 3 different waves of coffee. I also want to talk about what exactly third wave coffee is and kind of tie that into the concept of third spaces. I'm also going to go in depth on my case study and my survey and how my research questions can be applied to future business practices. So most people don't know this, but there are 3 different waves of coffee in the coffee industry. The first wave, this refers to people going to the grocery store and just buying a blend of beans off the counter and making it at home in their drip maker. Super convenient, super easy, and the coffee itself is often bitter and dark, and these are typically sold as blends. A bag of blend beans is just a bag with beans from different farms, all over the world. Second wave coffee, I feel as though most people are very familiar with this. It is the Starbucks, the Dunkin', the Dutch Bros of society. These shops really do kind of target a very wide audience. They have very expansive menus. They target the sweet drinks, the iced vanilla lattes, the frappuccinos, things like that. Third wave coffee is a very different approach to coffee. This is kind of referred to as specialty coffee, so artisanal roasting, customer education, and ethical sourcing. And to kind of dive more into that here, there are 3 key attributes to third wave coffee in general. It's going to be material, symbolic, and then in-person service. So the material attribute of third wave coffee refers to, yes, the coffee itself, but also the machinery that's used. So baristas typically work on very high-end expensive machines, grinders, things like that. The symbolic attribute of third wave coffee refers to where exactly the beans came from. So a lot of third wave shops, they have a wide variety of single origin bean selections. A single origin bag of beans means that all the beans in that bag came from one specific farm in either South America, Central America, Africa. And these beans typically have a very lighter body, more fruit notes than, say, like a bag of Folgers at H-E-B. And then third wave coffee also has an in-person service attribute. So the baristas that work at these shops are specifically trained on, yes, producing a very good quality cup of coffee, but also creating a very hospitable and welcoming environment to those that come in. They are in charge of educating the customers, kind of walking them through the flavor profile of the beans, what they're doing to extract the flavors properly, which kind of ties me into the concept of third spaces. So a third space is essentially a place where someone fosters community outside of their work or home. Productivity often meets socialization in these spaces, so this is where people can kind of work on a hobby. The gym could be considered a third place for people, the pool, a book club, a local dive bar. These are all examples of third spaces, and a lot of the times coffee shops are seen as third places for many people. Walk into any given coffee shop, you're gonna see somebody working on a laptop, maybe on a first date, maybe meeting friends. And so with that being said, third wave coffee really does have a large emphasis on community, and so third wave coffee shops very much tie into the aspect of being a third space for many. And this is where the barista does play a very important role here, because they're in charge of fostering this environment, creating a welcoming environment for customers to walk into, creating conversation with the customers and wanting them to come back in, thus creating a very strong community. So in order to conduct my research, I decided to conduct a case study. I picked a local third wave coffee shop here in Austin, Texas called Houndstooth Coffee, which was established in 2010. They have a motto of the pattern of coffee and people. So not only do they prioritize and emphasize quality coffee, which they produce very good coffee, I might add, but they are also concerned with building connection among their customers and building a very regular customer base. So specifically with this Houndstooth location that I decided to analyze, which is their first one established in 2010, there are 5 other in Austin and 3 in Dallas. They have a very strong community of regulars. These people have been coming in, a lot of them daily, since the first day that it opened. And since the shop is celebrating its 15th anniversary next month, obviously these people have been coming in for a very long time. So that community is very strong. The owner, the baristas, and the customers all know each other on a very personal level. So I had 2 different research questions in mind when analyzing third wave coffee. The first one being, how do third wave coffee practices influence customer experience? And then, do these third wave coffee tactics foster customer loyalty, thus building regulars more easy compared to places like Starbucks? And with this being said, I had a hypothesis in mind, which was that third wave tactics do positively affect customer experience and allow these third wave shops to build regulars more easier and can very easily become a third place for these customers coming in every day. So in order to collect my data, I decided to introduce a survey to the shop that I created through Qualtrics. This survey consisted of a series of open-ended questions in order for me to collect qualitative data. I wanted qualitative data specifically so that I could have more personalized, detailed responses from each of my survey takers. And I asked them a series of questions regarding their customer experience and their interaction with the menu and the products that the coffee shop offered, as well as the product quality, the staff. I asked them how often they came, either weekly, daily, monthly. I also asked how did they have to travel in or out of their daily routine to get there. And so here are some examples of some survey questions that I implemented. This first question here just was kind of an overall, like, what factors contribute to your loyalty? And this is when a lot of people kind of chimed in and said coffee quality, ambiance, staff, etc. I also had more detailed questions. Here is one just about the products in general and what about them makes you keep coming back. A lot of people here talked about consistency in taste and flavor profile and also milk steaming techniques. I had some comments about latte art, and I also had some comments about how well the barista could educate the customer on the product specifically. Here are 2 other examples. I asked about service. I did have some outliers here. A few people did say that service didn't play a very large role in their experience, but these could easily just be people coming in just to get their caffeine fix and nothing else. I also did ask about the social environment, kind of tying in that third space aspect of third wave coffee shops, and a lot of people did chime in here about the community that they built at Houndstooth specifically and why that makes them keep coming back in. So I kept my survey up for about 2 weeks, and I got 37 different respondents, which I'm very thankful for. And upon receiving my results, I decided to conduct a data analysis of which I coded my qualitative data for common themes. So what were the common attributes of this shop specifically that people kept repeating in their answers that ultimately led to the reason why they kept coming back in? So the 4 most commonly said attributes were coffee quality, service, ambiance, and proximity. Like I mentioned earlier, coffee quality had a lot to do with the beans itself, the flavor profile, the consistency. Service was mentioned quite a bit. A lot of people chimed in here on how they viewed baristas not just as employees of the shop, but as their friends, kind of tying in that community aspect here. And then ambiance was the third, which I asked the survey respondents to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how important the ambiance was to them. The average here was 3.92, which I find to be relatively high. And then proximity played the fourth largest role in customer loyalty here. I think it's important to note here that 16 out of 37 respondents traveled out of their way to come to Houndstooth, and a lot of these people are coming in every day, which I think speaks volumes on how much they appreciate the community that they've built and how much they value the quality in staff and products. Here's just some further visualization of my results. One of the questions that I asked were to customers to name their top 3 factors as to why they choose Houndstooth coffee. And of course, the top 3 were coffee quality, customer service, and ambiance, which are all key factors in third wave shops in general. So tying in my discipline here a little bit, I am a business management major with aspirations to own my own shop, and so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit here about the service profit chain theory. The service profit chain theory details and connects internal operations with customer experience and how that can lead to increased profitability. So looking closely at the case study that I conducted at Houndstooth, we can see here that the internal operations regarding staff training and quality control really do have a positive impact on how customers view the space and keeps them coming back in, which does, of course, lead to increased profitability for Houndstooth itself. So third wave tactics do increase profitability here, and I plan to implement these when coming up with a business plan for my own future coffee shop. There were some limitations to my study. I think it is important to note here that I actually do work at the Houndstooth coffee location that I conducted my case study at. I've worked here for almost 2 years, and it is the best job I've ever worked in my life, although, 21 years, not that long, but still. And while I love it so much, I do know a lot of these people on a personal level, which could have led to some bias in them answering my survey questions. Although all of the survey respondents were anonymous, there still could be some bias there, so I want to acknowledge that. I also had a pretty small sample size, 37 respondents, which was enough diversity in results for this study specifically. But this is also due to the fact that I only introduced a survey to one location in general. So this leads for further research. I would love to expand the survey to either other Houndstooth locations or maybe just other third wave coffee shops in the Austin area in general to kind of get a larger sample size and increase diversity in survey responses. I also think that honing in on specific coffee elements would be a very good idea, maybe just creating a survey purely based on the coffee or purely based just on the staff interactions to get more detailed responses as well. And then I also think that evaluating price would be interesting. I think a lot of people do consider third wave shops to be stingy or pretentious, or some would say overpriced, and a lot of people don't want to pay that much money for a cup of coffee. But a lot of people do. And I think it's interesting to know why they choose to pay that much, and obviously it says a lot about the experience and the coffee shop itself, tying that into third spaces and how they really value the community that they built there. So some key takeaways. My hypothesis was proven correct. Obviously, third wave tactics here really did have a positive impact on customer experience and did lead to increased production in regular customers. I do think it's important to note here that other businesses could very easily implement strategies like third wave coffee shops are doing now to increase their profitability and to make their space more welcoming for their customer base. Kind of looking at the model that Starbucks and Barnes & Noble has, I think other businesses could use that strategy and kind of creating a more welcoming environment, making themselves a third space for other people to increase their profits as well. I'd like to thank my thesis advisor, Dr. Varner, for all of her help, as well as my research participants and my family and friends for coming in and visiting me at the shop on the weekends, and of course the honors program here at St. Ed's. And does anybody have any questions?
Emily. So we have time for questions.
Yeah.
Do you see the big second wave, like the Dutch Brothers and the Starbucks,
Mm-hmm.
trying to incorporate some more of these third wave tactics? I mean, obviously they have a space for you to sit
Right.
and stuff, so they probably are regulars. It seems like over the last few years there's been more like, oh, this is this bean from this area.
Mhm.
So I mean, is that kind of trend that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they do have some specific third wave elements. I know recently Starbucks has actually started writing on the cups again versus having the stickers. That's to make more conversation with the guest, essentially, and to build that connection. So I think that's a perfect example of that. And I think that in turn will really help with just the atmosphere that they build there, for sure. Yeah.
We have a question, actually. I've always wondered this, and maybe this is beyond the scope of your research, but I've always wondered about coffee shops as third spaces and how profitable that is. Like if someone buys one cup of coffee and then they sit there and take up space for 4 hours, 5 hours on their computer. Did you do any research on that? Is there like some base number of cups someone needs to buy?
Yeah.
To be profitable, or?
I did not include that in my research, but that's a good point to bring up. I do think that while a lot of people, there are still customers that come in just for the coffee on the go, you know, of course that morning rush on the way to work. So I don't think customers sitting and staying necessarily reduces profits. It just adds to the atmosphere. But that is interesting for further research for sure. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, do you think that ordering coffee on an app makes things more second wave, less wave?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I have actually worked at a coffee shop specifically where we had online ordering, and it definitely takes away the personal aspect. Actually, the coffee shop, now that you say that, I remember, we do have that here now, but with those regulars specifically, we only recognize their name in their order. So it isn't necessarily very third wave. It is definitely more second wave, but it is still a customer nonetheless. So yeah.
Do like city policies or like societal changes impact third wave and its effectiveness? Like you mentioned quarantine, like what was kind of the third wave response to quarantine?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't work in coffee during quarantine, but let's use that as an example. It definitely, I mean, COVID influenced so many businesses purely for that aspect because people could not go in and actually sit there and take in the atmosphere. And so I think it definitely can have an effect on third wave coffee for sure. Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'd like to invite our advisor up here to give her a report and stole. As an honor student, she'll be able to wear these during graduation, and then ask Dr. Varner to say a few words as well.
All right, thanks so much for coming out this afternoon. It's my pleasure and truly caffeinated fueled honor to serve as the faculty advisor for Emily Hanzelka's honors thesis, a project that percolates at the intersection of business insight, customer experience, and some very thoughtfully brewed field work. All right, now as we all know, coffee isn't cheap, especially not third wave coffee, but as Emily's research reminds us, you're not just paying for a drink. You're investing in ethically sound beans, artisanal roasting, transparent supply chains, and an elevated customer experience. Third wave coffee is about more than just the beverage itself. It's about the ritual, the space, and the relationships it fosters. Through her qualitative study at Houndstooth Coffee, where she was both a researcher and a barista herself, Emily explored how third wave coffee shops function as third spaces, places beyond home and work where people build community and feel a sense of belonging and connectedness. Her findings show that when baristas are trained not only in coffee preparation but in empathy and engagement, customers are far more likely to return not just for the product but for the experience. Emily's research focuses on 4 key themes: coffee quality, service, ambiance, and convenience, offering a framework that's useful not only to the coffee industry but to anyone interested in creating meaningful, customer-centered experiences. What makes this project so impactful is that it doesn't just examine what's in the cup, but surrounds it. the human interactions, the intentionality of space, and the subtle cues that make people feel welcomed. Yes, third-way coffee may cost more, but as Emily's work shows, the real value lies in how customers experience it. And ultimately, what she's taught us is that the most memorable part of the visit may not be about the drink at all. It may be the feeling of being seen, remembered, and invited to return. Please welcome me in joining Emily on this timely, grounded, and insightful contribution to both academia, research, the business sector, and everyday life.